So I'll say we have some pretty interesting developments in this chapter regarding Dabi and his backstory. But before I get into it, let me just give you a little recap of what happened at the end of the previous chapter, since we are coming off of a break. So eventually we got to Shoto and Dabi facing off in their grand final battle, or at least the beginning of it. And Dabi was basically monologuing about how Hero Society has given birth to the rejects that are the League of Villains. And Shoto's like, oh yeah, okay, that's cool and all, but also you survived back then, so why didn't you come home? Referring to when he was a child in his big final moment of trying to, I guess, do the prominence burn on top of Mount Sokoto, and he wound up like blowing up the forest, and everyone came to the scene afterwards, including Endeavor and actually somebody else, which we'll get into. But the story goes that he only found like a piece of his jaw or something, and then of course he was assumed to be dead. But anyway, in the final page, Dabi was like, you really want to know? Fine, I'm happy to share. Here's the story of how I became Dabi, and the reason I'm still alive and kicking to tell the tale, even when I never stopped burning hotter than you, his masterpiece. And that brings us to this chapter, where it begins with the gorilla cop going to Dr. Garaki's cell. The old man is talking to himself, saying that they have spent a long time looking for seeds to cultivate, seeds that nurtured a hatred towards society, and that could become receptacles for All for One. We see a page showing Dabi and Shoto, and then cut to a flashback. So yeah, that's the big intricate elaborate plan that All for One revealed a couple chapters back as to why he was going through all of that stuff with Shigaraki, so that when they have All for One, they'll be strong enough to overcome the fail-safe of One for All and therefore be able to steal it. Because apparently All for One himself doesn't have enough hatred to accomplish this. Toya is burning on Mount Sokoto in despair, saying that he doesn't want to die and that he still needs to show Endeavor what he is capable of. Just as he is practically charred, a man in a suit and hat who appears to be All for One emerges from the flames. So yeah, somehow All for One was there. And I hope that reminded you of the Rise of Skywalker, because All for One is like pretty much Palpatine at this point. And I know I've talked about it a lot in these videos, but he doesn't need to be like connected and behind every single thing. But I guess since we're coming to the end of the series, Horikoshi just wants to tie everything up and have it all connect. On the next page, Toya gets up from his bed in a mysterious facility, decorated with various childish decorations. As soon as he awakens, several children notice his presence and become excited, saying that the sleeper has finally woken up after 3 years. So that's a surprise. Dabi was in a coma for 3 years after he blew up on Mount Sokoto. When he tries to say something, he notices that his voice is different. The children call the doctor, and we are introduced to a bizarre figure with a sunflower face. Toya asks him to let him out, and the doctor refuses, saying that from now on he will live there with his new family. Toya cannot accept this because he has said many horrible things to his family, and his father must be worried about him. Just then a voice comes out of the monitor and informs the boy that none of this will be possible because restoring his body was too difficult. The missing parts have been patched up using other people as a base, so he will no longer be able to use the full power of his flames. They would have liked to recruit him at the peak of his potential, but he turned out to be a failure. Hearing these words, he remembers what Endeavor used to say and he despairs. So Dabi is made up of cadaver pieces. That's pretty horrifying. However, the voice says that they might be able to revert his body to its former state if he stays there with them for a while and becomes a part of the family. Toya tells him to shut up and says that he doesn't want anyone to teach him anything. We see Garaki in present time, saying that it was already too late to convince him. Not even an all-controlling man like All for One could undo the impact Endeavor had caused on the boy's head. They were keeping several children as replacements in case something happened to Shigaraki, and Dabi was supposed to be one of them. But he burned down the facility and ran away. The gorilla cop is confused by the fact that all this was an All for One plan, but the doctor says that they should be careful because that boy survived in some way beyond their knowledge, since his body is in a state that shouldn't even last a month. So now you might be thinking, okay, so that accounts for 3 years after the Sokoto incident. But what was he doing afterwards? How did he survive? Well, Garaki says he was surprised when Giran brought Dabi to the League, And when Dabi went to get the high-end Nomu, and the two were alone, he comments that he knows it was the doctor who saved him from death. The doctor is happy that he realized this and asks him how he survived, but Dabi ignores him and says that by looking at the Nomu, he finally understood what they intended to do to him if he had agreed to stay there with the other children. Then the doctor says that he told him that he managed to avoid death through his flames of hatred and resentment. So that's it. He just ambiguously survived through the flames of his hatred and resentment. I guess it doesn't really matter. We don't really need to get too in-depth of a backstory on what he did, or him on the streets and coming through the underground or whatever. But cut back to the fight, and Toya says that he has indeed gone back home. As his body was weaker, he had already given up on meeting Endeavor's expectations, but he still hoped that the family environment had changed after 3 years. But when he arrived at the house, he saw his funeral altar and the infernal training to which Endeavor subjected Shoto. He realized that he was indeed a defective product and his entire existence was already left in the past. So that's interesting. Dabi did show up afterwards, try to reconcile, I suppose, but he saw that Endeavor was already unhinged even more than he was before, sparked of course because of his alleged death and the training that he was doing on Shoto, what we came to see in season 2. And then he was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not needed. Dabi says that he exceeded his body's limits. His body started to become disfigured. He didn't want to meet Endeavor again weak like that, so he kept training his flame. And even though his skin burned, he felt no pain from the surgeries that were done on him. The more he saw Endeavor on TV, the more his hatred grew, and the more he took inspiration on his techniques. We see a flashback of him praying at the altar in the Todoroki household, and he says at that moment Toya died, and in his place, Dabi was born. So that's interesting too, and it gives more credence to why his quirk is called cremation. I think that's a clever little tie-in by Horikoshi there, but I don't know if his quirk is ever called cremation in the series. I think it's only revealed in the Ultra Analysis book, maybe. Still, pretty cool. The doctor says that fire is an energy source that gives life to things and allows many others to function. However, Dabi's flames exist only to bring death, and that this is not compatible with All for One, who wants to live forever. What follows is an impressive page of Dabi melting the top of the All Might statue. No! While Garaki says that these are the deadly obsessive flames that have escaped the reach of the King of Demons. The Todoroki brothers prepare to use Flash Fire Fist at the same time, and Dabi says he's going to destroy everything important to Endeavor, and this will be the proof that he's alive. But Shoto says that he won't let his stupid brother do as he pleases. End of chapter. So I guess we are truly getting into the final battle between them here. I don't know if this is going to be like a clean stretch until it sees itself through, meaning like the next 3 or 4, maybe even 5 chapters, it's just going to be them going at each other. I mean, there is a lot going on, so hopefully Horikoshi kind of goes back and forth like he did with the previous war, but we'll see what happens. Let me know what you think about these spoilers in the comments, and if you like the video, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.